This is the review of Solid State Logic's SSL 12. And I'm going to compare it to the SSL 2 Plus that I have over here. I'll tell you about the differences and, more importantly, the real value between those differences, at least as I see it. And at the end, I'll share with you what drives me crazy about both of these interfaces. Now here in Storybabble, I try to give tips on how to make better video, and I'm a little reluctant to review this product because you might not actually need this as a filmmaker. But you might find yourself wanting to record audio directly into your computer, and that's where an audio interface comes in. Now I also write and record original music, I play in a couple bands, and I really enjoy that hobby, so having a really good interface is very important to me. The SSL 2 Plus sells for $229, and it is a fantastic interface. There's actually a stripped down version for $179 where you don't get MIDI, and I think there's only one headphone jack. It's really for the solo creator. But this is a fantastic interface, and I have really enjoyed using it. On the other hand, the SSL 12 costs $399. That's a difference of $170. That is a lot of money. So let's talk about whether it's worth it. Now, this is not a sponsored video, and while this channel is monetized now, thank you very much, I bought this with my own money, and you can be assured that this is an unbiased review. Now, if you would please subscribe and hit the like button, that would help me out a lot, and maybe then I could start doing biased reviews. I mean, sponsored reviews on products. That would be very helpful. First, let's talk about the obvious differences. The 12 has 4 channels, while the 2 Plus only has 2. But that doesn't mean that this is worth twice as much money as this one, because in actual use, you usually only use one channel at a time. You'll use the first channel, and maybe if you're doing something in stereo or miking 2 guitars or something like that, you're going to use 2 microphones at one time. Now, to use 3 or 4 is going to mean you're going to have some sort of a podcast or something like that, or miking some drums, for example. So the times that you're going to be using 3 or 4 are going to be pretty rare. But I do have occasions sometimes to use the 3rd and 4th channel, so it is worth something to me, although not double. So what would I pay for the 2 extra channels? Well, probably $50 and 50. Now the SS12 is called the 12 because it can take in 8 more inputs through this ADAT connector on the back. The problem is in order to get a quality 8-channel input ADAT device, it's going to cost you about $800. Now you can get cheaper ones, but why would you want to get cheap preamps? So you have to ask yourself, am I really going to use that ADAT connection? And if not, it's not worth anything. And it's certainly not worth anything to me. Next, you can see that the 12 has these 2 high Z inputs for the 1st and 2nd channel. This is really helpful because you can just plug a guitar right into them. On the 2 Plus, you can do the same thing. They're just on the back, a little harder to get to, and then you have to press a button combination in order to get the high Z. So what's that worth? Well, it is a little more convenient. I'm going to say $5. Yeah. Now they've also moved the headphone jacks from the back to the front, and this is a big deal to me because it is a pain to plug your headphones in the back, especially if you plug and unplug them as much as I do. So for that, $20. Yeah, that really is a pain. Next, the 12 has added these 3 real useful buttons on the front. These are programmable buttons that you can program in the SSL 360 app, but they come with some defaults. Let's go over those. The first is this talkback feature. There's a tiny little microphone right here, and this allows you, when this is pressed down, to talk to anyone that's in the headphones. Now, prior to having this, I had a Mackie interface that had this talkback feature, and I absolutely loved it. And while I prefer the preamps and the Solid State Logic interface, the Mackie is actually pretty good. This talkback feature is so important to me that I'm going to give it a value of $50. $52. The next button is called Alt, and it sends it to an alternative set of speakers. On the back of the unit there are 4 balanced outputs, so this means that you can send 2 stereo pairs. And this little button here, by default, will switch it from sending to 1 and 2 to 3 and 4. I really enjoy this feature because I can not only send out the signal to my professional monitors, but I can also send it to some crappy speakers to see how it's going to sound kind of in the real world. This is very useful and, to me, worth about $10. Next, there's this cut button, which is British speak for mute, and that's worth, well, really nothing to me because I can just mute it like turning the knob like that, but then you do have to turn it back, so I guess if you've worked really hard at setting it just where you want, you can mute it here, and that is worth Nothing to me. So I won't be using that button, but like I said, these are programmable, and there are 3 other things you can program these buttons to do. You can program this button, or actually any of the buttons, to work as a dim feature, which means that it will remove your volume from one level to another and dim it down by the number of decibels you set up in the program. So if you want to just kind of lower the volume, you can press it there, and then you're back right at the volume that you had. Again, kind of like a mute button. Not worth anything to me. Now the feature that I have programmed in here is turning the signal into a mono signal. And sometimes when you're listening, you want to hear what's this going to sound like in mono, and I can just press that button and find out. That's fantastic, and that's worth probably $10. And lastly, you can program any of these buttons to flip the polarity of the left channel to see whether or not there is a phase problem. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. You're kind of out of buttons anyway. Now both these units are powered directly off the USB, so you can just plug it into your computer and you don't have another power cord. The 12 has added a power button. Well, that's nice, but that didn't really bother me about the 2 Plus, so I'm not giving that any money. Oh, and no review about these units would be complete without mentioning the 4K buttons here on the front panel. Now these aren't the 4K that you're used to, this just means 4000. It refers to an SSL unit that was called the 4000, and this colors your sound to sound more like that board. Well, it's kind of gimmicky, and nobody really wants to bake these into their audio recording, so I suggest that you turn them off and just pretend that they're not there. Now before I get into my last feature and my big complaint, I want to point out that there is one knob that was removed from the 2 Plus and is not in the 12. And that's this one right here that allows you to switch your monitor from listening to those things that are coming back in through USB and what is coming through the inputs at this time. This allows you to make a mix very quickly when someone's singing about how much of them they hear versus how much of the audio that's coming back into them is being played. And this is a really great feature. You have to use that on the 360 software with the 12. And I actually miss it so much that I'm going to take away $20 that I gave earlier. Now, it's not that it's actually worth $20 to me, but I'm a little upset whenever I lose a feature. So I'm doubling the penalty here in this case. Now for one of the big differences between these two units, bitrate. The SSL 2 Plus is 24-bit. The SSL 12 is 32-bit. What's the difference? 8-bit. That's kind of a trick question. Now, do you need 32-bit recording over 24-bit recording? Well, the stuff that you're hearing on most everything is 16-bit recording. So it's kind of like shooting in 8K and then taking it down to 4K. It's not a perfect analogy, but basically a higher bit rate, the more you're going to process it, work with it. So it is kind of an important thing, but only if you're going to do a lot of processing to your audio. Otherwise, I doubt you will ever, I'm going to say ever one more time, ever hear the difference. So the big question is whether or not 32-bit is worth the $43 that's left on the table, and that's a decision that you'll have to make for yourself. For me, I bought this probably more out of emotion than actual logic, so I probably should have stayed with this. Don't tell my wife. But I really, really like this unit in so many other ways that I bit the bullet. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you what drives me absolutely crazy about these interfaces. For whatever reason, they've chosen to silkscreen the words right above each button. And that means that when you're looking at it at an angle, which you do when it's on your desk, you can't actually read anything. This drives me absolutely crazy. So would you rather have this and $170, or would you rather have this? Well, the real question is, do you need an interface at all? For example, if you just want to do some simple voiceover work, a USB microphone might be just what you're after. And I did a review of the Rode PodMic USB right over there. And check it out. See if that's something that might fit you better. Again, thanks, and please subscribe.